Welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
Hello and welcome to Hidden History of Rock and Roll. I'm your host, Tiffany Scott. And if you are new to my podcast, I do a deep dive into behind-the-scenes stories of rock's greatest legends, how they came to be, how the records got played, and maybe some dirty secrets if we are lucky. This is your all-access backstage pass. Today, we welcome yet another industry legend. He started his career at Polydor Records and worked with such bands as Rainbow, Scorpions, Travers Band, Leppard, Bon Jovi, John Cougar Mellencamp, Big Country, Dexy's Midnight Runners, The Resurrection of Kiss, Without Makeup and Back to Makeup, and then Motorhead. Wow. I am thrilled to welcome to the show Jerry Jaffe. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. I am thrilled because you have been longtime friends with my dad and Eli Bird as well. It's like we're family, even though I don't know. We've probably met somewhere along the way. But you're always like family, you know.
And they were mentors of mine in a way, as we will see.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, we can just jump right in then, and we can start telling the audience how you got involved in the music industry.
Well, I really wasn't on my mind to ever wind up working in the business. And it's very roundabout, but I actually have a PhD in nuclear chemistry from Columbia University, and I was teaching chemistry at Marymount Manhattan College, an all-girls school in Manhattan.
Wow.
And on recess, summer recess, I think it was 1973, I had never really been anywhere, and flights were very cheap to Europe, and I got a cheap flight to Amsterdam. And I knew nothing about anything in Europe, and there I was in Amsterdam. And I hadn't spoken to anybody face to face for over 24 hours. And I get up and I see I'm next to a club. I'm staying at a bed and breakfast, and the club is called Paradiso. And there's a band playing called Brinsley Schwartz. And I said, what a coincidence, because 3 years previously, I had seen this band at the Fillmore East opening up for Quicksilver Messenger Service and Van Morrison. I didn't know who this band is with this crazy name, but I kind of remembered it and didn't make any impression. But then I see this 4 years later, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go in. And I did. And the band is playing, and they finish, and they're kind of putting their roadieing their own instruments. And I go up and I start talking to one of the guys in the band. And then I said, you know, you're not going to believe this. I was at the show in New York at the Fillmore, and here we are, and blah, blah, blah. And then we start talking, and he says, well, let's get a bite to eat. And the person turns out to be the main songwriter in the band, Nick Lowe, who, of course, went on to great things and produced Elvis Costello, and great solo artist, Jesus is Cool and Stiff Records. But anyway, at that, so he asked, are you coming to London? And I said, sure, I am. He said, you got a place to stay? I said, no, I'm just traveling around by myself. And he said, well, the band, we have a house. It's you could stay there. Nobody's there in August. And so I took him up on it, and I go and I'm staying with him for a few days. And they're going to start on a new album soon. And he's also has this producer, Dave Edmonds, who I knew from his solo career. And all of a sudden, I got two friends. And then there's something called pub rock going on. And I start hanging out with him, and I meet these other people. And then he starts introducing me to people. And he says to me, you know, Jackie, you should be in the music business. And I never thought of that. And I really wanted to get out of the chemistry business for a lot of reasons. One of those has kept me out of the war, by the way. I got to defer it. And he put this thing in my mind to be in the music business. And he introduced me to people at his label in England. I put them on a resume. I came back to New York. They hooked me up with other people, and I would have a meeting and put them on my resume, like Seymour Stein, for instance. So he became a friend. And then I started meeting people, but I didn't have, I never did anything in the record business. Then I started writing letters to all these record company presidents. I took out personal ads in Billboard and Record World and Cashbox. And lo and behold, I get a call from Polydor Records. I have an interview with the president. The guy looks at me and says, "Can you be humble?" Because I guess he thought, you don't know anything, but you're a smart guy. Mm-hmm. And they gave me a job. And I must also thank one of the people who put in a good word for me, who I knew at the time was Cliff Bernstein, who's the longtime manager of Q Prime with Metallica and a great friend. So they put me in the promotion department with an unnamed, with some gopher job. I was resented by everybody in the promotion department, because why the hell did you give this guy? He never was in the music business before. But anyway, I kind of made my peace with everything. I soaked up every bit of knowledge you could have. Mm-hmm. And within a 2-year period, I went from that job to head of press, vice president of press, to head of rock album promotion, to VP of promotion, to senior VP of A&R.
Sounds like you're a smart guy.
So obviously that was my meteoric rise, and that is kind of the let's say the nexus into how I kind of worked very closely with all of these bands through promotion and then through signing them.
That's an amazing story. I love hearing these stories. They are so great and poignant. I mean, it really does. It's really interesting.
I mean, it was like an amazing coincidence. Mm-hmm. And when you're talking, I'm having. Like, who knew that I'm talking, it's my first day outside of America, and I'm talking to this guy from a band. I said, what kind of fakakta band brings me shorts? And now we've stayed friends, and he's become like an iconic figure in music. Who knew?
Who knew? Yeah. I mean, these stories all are kind of the same, but how people have just fallen into it by chance, or they met someone and that's how they got into the music industry. It's a very interesting story and very, very fun. And the bands that you've gotten to work with are so incredible. And we're going to, today we're going to focus on the iconic Jersey rock band, Jersey, Bon Jovi. But you knew them in the beginning as
As John Bon Jovi.
Bon Jovi?
Bon Jovi, Bongovi. That's how he was signed.
Okay. And how did that go from Bon Jovi to what we know today is Bon Jovi?
Well, after the band was signed, and we'll go back to how that happened, John's manager, and he came to me and said that he didn't want to really be a solo artist. He wanted to be known as a band, if we could come up with a band name. And they were tossing around certain names, and one was almost gaggo. It was the Spiders from New Jersey.
Oh, my God.
Anyway, that same night, I went home, and I probably was in the shower, and it just hit me. The guy's name was John Bon Jovi. Let's make it Bon Jovi. 2 words, change the spelling to Jovi. It has the cadence of Van Halen, and it references Bon Scott, who had just passed, from AC/DC. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think of it like a great light bulb. It's just the name. I'll throw it out to them, right? I didn't come in saying, you got to hear this. This is unbelievable. What a genius I am. And so I went to the first one I said it to was their manager, Doc McGee. I said, Doc, what do you think of this? And I said, Bon Jovi. And I explained it to him just as I just said it. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me and said, Chappie, this is a rock band. That's a French vanilla ice cream. Wow. I said, okay, just then. So I don't hear anything for 2 days. And then I'm up in my office and somebody comes in and say, hey, that kid, we signed from New Jersey, he has a band now, and the band is called Bon Jovi, and they came, and it's kind of like his last name. I said, oh, okay.
So you got credit, sort of?
Well, I got no credit.
Oh.
It was like Bon Jovi. I didn't run around saying, hey, that was me, or it was me.
Well, so today I'm getting the exclusive story, the real story.
That is as real as it gets.
That's the exclusive.
And what's interesting about many years later, probably the last time I ever looked at Wikipedia for Bon Jovi and the story, and it said that he got the name Bon Jovi from some woman who was working in Doc McGee's office.
Oh, boy.
And then I actually changed it, and I wouldn't even know how to do that now, because that you could actually put something in there in Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
And then I changed it, and then about 2 days later, it was gone. So
wow.
And I never asked for credit. Like I had my whole career, I spent 35 years in the record business. People said, "What do you really want to be known for?" I said, everybody always argues who takes credit for this, who takes credit for that. The one thing that's unequivocal is that I came up with that name.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. There you go. It's someone else wanting that, light bulb of an idea credit.
Yeah, I mean, I never said to John it was my idea. It happened, and I didn't say it was me who gave. I don't know where it came from. Maybe he thought that Doc came up with it, but it was so exact. I mean, who else would have come? I had the spelling, and that whole explanation. But anyway, let's move on.
Well, I'm going to pause for a Patreon ad right now.
If you are enjoying listening to Hidden History of Rock and Roll, please consider becoming a friend of the show on Patreon for only $5 a month. Your support will help deliver more excellent content. Plus, as a member, get your questions answered by the next legendary guest. Thanks for being the best part of Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
We're back with Jerry Jaffe. And we're discussing the iconic Jersey rock band Bon Jovi. And I was curious, my own question, were there any band conflicts?
At the time, at the beginning, there were none that I ever surmised. And in fact, I kept up a relationship with John and a couple of the guys for about 20 years till the turn of this century. And to me, John and Richie Sambora, they were like joined at the hip. On a couple of times that we got together, I showed up as just a friend, because I was, gone from Polygram, and it was always like a tag team, and I never saw any rift whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good.
What happened after that, I have no idea. It's always a weird thing. I know that, Richie did a couple of solo albums, and, that's always, difficult for, bands, when
mm-hmm.
that happens.
Yeah. Everybody's got an ego.
Right. And I think what's the old joke? One used to say, I think, what's the last thing the drummer said before he was fired from the group is, "Hey guys, you got to hear my new solo album."
So true. So we'll just go ahead and dive in deep on your career. We got the salacious stuff out of the way. Well, we might have some more salacious stuff, but we'll dive deep into your career with Bon Jovi and how that all came about.
Okay, well, it's interesting because a lot of people, after the fact, and we were going on, over 40 years, the band being spectacularly successful. And, when you're there and the way, it's signed, I mean, you never really think, boy, this is going to be 150 million albums or anything like that. it starts out, so kind of small and grows, even in the sense of perception. It wasn't like Elvis going into Sun Records and, Sam Phillips saying, it's basically a demo tape that John's manager brought to Derek Schulman, who was working in my department. And Derek, I had hired, he was in the band Gentle Giant, British kind of art rock band. And so I hired him along with some other people. And one is I wanted to hire a lot of people who were ex-artists. I also hired the great Al Cooper, who is now in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Anyway, the lawyer named Arthur Mann gave Derek this tape. And then Derek came to me because I was head of the party and says, I really like this. You should listen to it. And I said, yeah. And I liked it too. And it had what I remember, Runaway on it, which eventually was the first single, but also, and I didn't know this, was on a homegrown album that these rock stations used to put together at the time, and it was like for local talent. And this station that put it together was WAPP, which was the least of the three AOR rock stations in New York at the time in terms of audience, whatever. Anyway, they put this out, and supposedly maybe they gave it airplay. I don't know. I never listened to this station, but I thought this was really a great song. And I said to Derek, and then Derek says they're playing at a club in New York. They were playing at the Copacabana. And I know it, it's like the Peter Allen song, but no, they actually had rock bands towards the end of its existence. And Derek went to see them, and he came back. And the day later, I said, "So Derek, what did you think?" And he looked at me and he said, "They're okay."
Oh.
Now, if he would have said to me, "This band is amazing," I would say, "Okay, let's sign them." I didn't have to see them, right? I hire people. Yeah, I trust their judgment completely. But I'm not going to sign somebody, a band, when one of my people say they're okay. So I set up I don't want to call it audition. Sometimes we put the band in a recording studio in the afternoon, so I'd go and see the band. Not at a club, right? So it was at SIR on, I think it was on 52nd Street. It could have been Rocket City. It was kind of close to the office. We could kind of walk there, and it was like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, which no band wants to play at. And so the band was there, and there was like 4 people in the audience, right? A couple of people from my department. And the band starts playing, and they play like half a song. It's this shit. And I go, "I've seen enough. Let's do the deal."
Wow.
And they looked at me like, what are you, crazy? I said, "No, you guys, you look good. You're smart. You're happy. We're having a good time. I know you can play. It's 4:00 in the afternoon." And I had my head of business affairs there, and their lawyer was there, Arthur Mann. And they said, "Well, why don't you two guys go back to the office and let's come up with a deal?" Hey, it's great. I love it.
Wow.
That's how that deal was done. And of course, as history is always written, that the person who signed Bon Jovi is obviously Derek Schulman, and I think he had quite a career from that signing. But there's the background to it, and then to continue on that level. So John was very well connected with people because he worked for his cousin, Tony Bon Jovi. He did stuff around the studio, and John worked around the studio, and he cut, and Tony and his assistant, Lance Quinn, they cut these songs, including kind of a finished version of Runaway, which went on to that homegrown album and was on this demo tape. So John, he was connected with her. He knew one of the promoters very well in the New York area, John Scher, actually more in New Jersey. He ran the Capitol Theater. And somehow he was on the radar of David Krebs, who was manager with his buddy of the Lieber Krebs management. They had Aerosmith and a whole bunch of other acts, including Scorpions. And at the beginning, they were the American managers of Def Leppard. And so what was interesting, so John, booked and whoever, he got favors, and he booked himself as opening act for other acts. I mean, the one that I most remember, I know he did ZZ Top, but he opened up at the Ritz, the big club in New York, for Patti Smythe and Scandal. And for those of a certain age will know that she had a couple of hit records, especially on rock radio. And then I believe she married John McEnroe. They might still be married. I don't know. I don't read the New York Post. So, so at that show, and that was like the first time I actually had to see him in full battle array, and they were fabulous. I say, Rich, this is a great, great band. Then after the show, I go backstage, and John pulls me aside and says, listen, I don't have a manager. I'm not, if anybody says that they're managing me, it's not true. But who's waiting to see him? John Scher and David Krebs, who kind of claim that they're managers or managers to be. And I had also invited, because as friend, Doc McGee to the show. But Doc McGee did not come. But one of the people who worked for him, named Richie Fisher, he came to the show. And Richie, he handled one of Doc's newest acquisitions, Motley Crue. So he was kind of the road manager of Motley Crue. I guess he was slumming that day. So I guess Richie was there, and he went back, the next day, I guess, and he said to Doc, Polydor signed this, great act. You should, kind of check it out. Now, Doc's kind of connection was that he was sort of managing Pat Travers' band. And I was always been very close to Pat, and that's another very long story. I did not sign Pat. Pat was signed to the British company. He's a wonderful Canadian guy out of Ottawa, and he signed to Britain. And then nothing was happening when he came to America, and I was just starting a promotion, and I said, you know what? I'm going to hitch my wagon to this guy. And we just became very close. I can't say enough about Pat. He's just a great guy, and to this day we still converse. Anyway, so Pat used a rehearsal studio. He had moved to Florida, and Doc kind of was running the studio, or he put money into the studio. And so Pat and Doc became friends, and then I guess Pat had severed with his management. His old management from England, and kind of Doc was there, and then I got to meet Doc, and we became friends. And I said, I'm signing this guy, and he couldn't come, and Richie Fisher comes. And then, so there's this battle to become manager of John, I guess at the time, John Bon Jovi. I don't think it was Bon Jovi then, probably then. But so anyway, you're probably wondering, how did Doc get to be manager going up against all these heavyweights who thought that they had an in? Well, Doc, being very shrewd, he got in close with John's parents. And so him and his girlfriend, Wendy, were always out there in New Jersey, in Sayreville, where they lived. And as we would say in New Jersey, down the pike or down the parkway. And they would clean up, they would wash dishes, and Doc just ingratiated himself to the family. And next I know that he was the manager. And then I brought you up to date with the French vanilla ice cream comment. And
wow.
And there it is. Now Doc has management. The band has a group name. We put the single out, and it begins to be very well received at rock radio. And then the other thing that we had at Polydor, and by this time it was Polygram, because we had combined Mercury and Polydor. That's why John was on the Mercury label. And we just decided it was a little more rock friendly. It didn't really matter It was, and we also had bought Casablanca, but we knew Casablanca wasn't the one to go. Too many dance acts, and kind of Mercury would be it because they had, Scorpions was beginning to happen, and they had Big Country from England and Dexys. So anyway. The other thing we had going at Polydor, we had so many of these rock bands, a lot of whom you mentioned in your marvelous Too Good introduction, that we could kind of pair up or ask people to take, could this band be your opening act? And we were able to put, it wasn't like we did it. But, we were close with the agents. All these bands had something going for them. And then you got a little airplay. And then you could open up for Scorpions. You could open up for Rainbow or Travers and even Kiss. And we kept John out there. Plus there were other bands. I know he went out with 38 Special for a while. I'm probably forgetting. And he always did well, opening up for acts, but that was kind of the way it was going to be because in those days you had so much air. You can only go so far with just rock radio. You had to cross it over, and it was always a difficult thing. And anyway, the record did go gold, and it did the album, and it was a really good start. But I will tell you this. There was a lot of in those days, and I don't think this applies to the music business today. In fact, it is complete. There was something called tour support, where the bands and their management would come to the label, and because you couldn't, to keep a band out on the road as an opening act with the little that they were getting, it wasn't, there was no profit in it. So the record company would put up the money. And that money was usually, let's say 99% recoupable. Meant that the band had to sell records, but they didn't get their royalties until they paid off the loan, which was called tour support. And I knew that this band was happening on the road, but sales started to, we were selling well, but not good enough for the financial powers that be at the label, and they wanted to say, okay, just let's stop it. We're going to pick up the option on the band, let them start a new record. And I remember I had to really go to bat to, I said we should keep this band on the road. And it was kind of going against the established thought at the label. But I can prove it because if one goes to my Facebook page and I actually have the letter that was written to all the executives and the president on down asking for more money to keep the band on the road. And we eventually did get it. So, it wasn't the easiest thing, when you look back on it, that they did build up gradually to the point that when they came out with the third album and had the amazing Living on a Prayer and You Give Love a Bad Name, that they were ready to go into the stratosphere. And that's all it took. But all the seeds were planted, and I think that's one of the things that at Polygram I was very influential in, and I'm very proud of.
Oh, that's a fabulous story. And my curiosity is the year and the time that all this was going on. To start, like the single, and just to backtrack on the beginning part of your story, what year was this?
The first album was released, I believe, in January of 1984. And the second album would have come out probably, I would say about a year later, I would say maybe January, February of 85. And the second album did not go over well. We didn't have a song on it that was as immediate as Runaway. I forget sorry, it's bad. Which song or songs we were pushing on that record. However, all through that time, we kept the band on the road. And the other thing, and I give this credit to Doc, because he took the band to Europe, which meant we also had to kind of push the English label and the European labels especially, and and a bit in Asia on the record, because in that time, this is 85. It wasn't very hip to be an American rock band in Europe. It was still, post-punk, new wave, Eurythmics type, and nobody at those labels were kind of saying, okay, we'll give this American rock band a shot, because it wasn't for them cool enough, even though there was a very influential magazine in England called Kerrang, and Kerrang kind of took to this band. And in those days, because now I think print was important, especially something that went into the heart of rock fans, was that magazine. And the band went out there and did really well, gathering fans. And this is before the big album, Slippery When Wet. I know everybody says, oh, yeah, that's the one that broke them. But, there was a lot of work done before, and it didn't happen overnight. And when, unfortunately, I have to say this, truth is that when Slippery When Wet came out, I was no longer at the label. And I don't want to get into the politics as the rancor that went on, but I was dismissed, to put it mildly. Although, because I had a relationship with the band and Doc, I was kind of kept up to date, and they would ask what my feelings were about things, and I remember saying, "Living on a Prayer." There it is. That's the career maker. And what was also interesting, and then they said, it's the first time that John wrote with other people. I guess that was Desmond Childs. I think he co-wrote that song with. I wouldn't be so. But anyway, I think that we got it to the point where it was ready to go. And when John broke, he broke all over the world. And you could not say that about so many bands, let's say, that were rock radio staples of the early, mid, and late 80s.
And when they were touring before the Slippery When Wet, before they really broke, and they were opening for bands, is that how it worked?
Yes.
Do you remember?
More or less. I remember going to England. I guess I don't know. I think it was for the second album, and they opened at the Wembley Arena for Kiss.
Oh wow!
So I don't remember if I or who. I think that could be Doc, because Doc eventually wound up managing Kiss, so certainly had a relationship. But I remember going out there, and it was always great to go to a show and have 2 or 3 of your bands playing. And it made me feel good, because we were always at Polygram. We were kind of the underdog. We weren't Columbia, CBS, Sony. We weren't the great Warners. We weren't in fact, when I started the label, they hardly ever had a hit in the 10 years there. I mean, I really have to go back and think of pre-1975 what success they had. So it was always great to go and see, our bands playing together. And then there was one time we had a tour out. I say we, I mean, it was put together by the agencies, but it was Rainbow, Scorpions, Pat Travers. That's the bill, coast to coast. And I believe Travers and Rainbow alternated headlining depending which city they were stronger. So.
Yeah,
that was a great thing, and that's why I should now go on. It was my idea, and we formed the rock department at Polygram, and the rock department encompassed rock promotion, what was called then artist relations, working with promoters, and also having our own marketing guy who would just be an expert in marketing rock acts, and that was the late Jim Lewis. Was that, and then we also got involved heavily with catalog, and I appointed Bill Levinson, who became a legendary repackaging guy at Polygram and then Universal. And he won a Grammy Award for the Crossroads with Eric Clapton. So it's part of that. I used to say that I might not have become rich and famous in the record business, but people who worked with me did.
Well, my plan is to make everybody famous. And, the other part I can't do anything about, but famous I'm trying.
That's okay.
Infamous. I'm
infamous.
trying.
That's fine. Listen, I had a great time. I got lots of years in. I made great friends. I have no regrets. One could always say, I came out of the academic world. I had no idea that I was in the cutthroat business world. I thought this was rock, this is music. How can it be a cutthroat business?
Wow, yeah, sure is.
I could tell stories that I would rather not. But it was amazing without kind of naming names. There were certain infamous people on both sides of the Atlantic who, for some reason, took a shine to me. And I don't know why. And I had great relationships with these people.
Well, that's great. I mean, that's what you need. Relationships is what it's about.
I was just so happy to get up every day and be in the music business. I can't. It was like a fantasy. I couldn't believe it. But anyway.
And you had a good relationship with John Bon Jovi and the band.
The only, and never when we were face to face, is that about 10 years after he was signed, I was no longer with the company, and John gave out certain interviews and said that he got his record deal because he played at the wedding of this record company, executive record company guy, which wasn't really true. Yes, I was the guy. It was my wedding. It was at the Lone Star Cafe. It was October 23rd, 1983. John and his manager came to me when they heard that I was getting married at the Lone Star. Said, "Hey, why don't we get together and play? It'll be the first time. You got most of the people from the record company will be there, and we'll play and we'll have a great time." And I said, "That's great." And I said, "You'll have a great time too, because not only do I have the catering from the Lone Star Cafe, but I got the Second Avenue Deli bringing the best Jewish cuisine you can have." So you got Tex-Mex, you can have corned beef and pastrami on rye, and we'll have a great time.
That's funny.
And they did, and they brought as a gift. They all came in the front door, and it was pouring that day too. They all came in the front door drenched, but holding a gift for me that was packaged in silver wrapping paper, and they were all wax sets. So I received 25 wax sets from Bon Jovi and management. They were all piled up on the stage as they played. I actually, for a while, they knew that I kind of was dabbling in Chinese cooking and had a wok, and I probably mentioned it to somebody. And then there's let's get Jerry Jaffe a wok set. Of course, those were gifts that people gave at weddings and showers too. But anyway.
Well, that's an awesome exclusive.
I also playing that day was Kinky Friedman decided to play at my wedding, and he didn't have a guitar. So he used either John or Richie's electric guitar as a DI. The late great Kinky Friedman. I want to put in a plug there.
Wow, that's incredible. That must have been really fun.
Yeah, well, that was a great pairing. I mean, they would go off and play with Kiss and Travers and Scorpions and Rainbow. But one of their early gigs, they played with Kinky Friedman.
At that executive's wedding.
Yes, at the executive's wedding, right.
That's how he got signed.
Yeah, of course. It was a quid pro quo. I said, "Kid," I was such a stark. I said, "Kid, you don't play this wedding, you're out in the cold."
I mean, really, those are the best stories, though. They really are. Yeah. But you did have a good relationship with them after you left
Absolutely. And you know what? If we were walking down the street and we just noticed each other, I'm sure we would embrace.
That's good to hear.
There's no hard feelings. Any of the people I remained friends with Doc for many, many years after that. And it's funny, too, that this year I got back together with his original manager, Peter Mantis, who was John's boyhood friend. And in fact, the one time when I went out to see John play, like this was after we signed them, but and I thought I was going to see John play at his parents' house in the basement, but it was actually at Peter Mantis's house.
Wow.
And then Peter was kind of the guy who he carried all the stuff for them. He did like original, local press and things. And then he basically said, "Listen, John, I'm just a friend. I can't do this. You need a real manager." And then Peter was with him for, I guess, as in maybe kind of his quasi road manager for a couple of years. And then they split, and they kind of was friends, not as close as they used to be. But out of the blue, Peter Mantis called me about a year ago, and we got together. So there you go.
So, Jerry, we've spent a good amount of time talking about Bon Jovi, but I want to know, is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I think I give him and the band lots of credit, because when they were signed and the way they were initially promoted, they didn't really have kind of that kind of working class je ne sais quoi, let's say, of Bruce Springsteen, their fellow, New Jerseyan. And somehow they transcended what at the time, I don't say that was Bon Jovi per se, but there was something called hair bands. And I think with retrospect, it's kind of laughed at, almost like Charleston and Flappers and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I think that John and the band transcended everything and kind of became meaningful. And I think, that is something that they did on their own. Whatever I did at the beginning, discovering that's one thing, but there's something that they inherently greatness, which I don't think anybody could have grasped at the beginning. You don't, as an A&R person, when you're looking for talent, say, "Oh, I just saw this. They're going to sell 150 million," or in a good day, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll sell that. I think something has to happen where the talent really shows out, and I think that's one thing I wanted to get across about John and the band.
Yeah, I mean, they worked really, really hard. They made some great music videos. Did you did you ever go on tour with them at all?
Well, I went to many shows. I'm not going to say I went in a tour bus with them. Mm-hmm. I did that for other bands, including one that I managed for 9 years, the Jesus and Mary chain. But with Bon Jovi, I would say I saw a fair amount of shows, mm-hmm. And hung out backstage, and kind of had a lot of personal talks with everyone in the band. I'm not going to go into detail, but even David Bryan, the keyboard player, for those who didn't know, his name wasn't originally David Bryan, and when it kind of changed it, and I kind of said, "Ooh, I don't think your father's going to be happy with that."
Oh no!
We'll leave it right there.
Wow.
But and by the way, he's gone on to do a lot of great things. He's written the score for 2 Broadway shows, and I mean, he was a very, very smart guy. And but I mean, that was the thing about the band. They had different people took center stage. I mean, the drummer Tico Torres used to be with a band called Frankie and the Knockouts. Frankie and the Knockouts had a big hit called Street Heart. Mm-hmm. And kind of what's interesting about that, to wrap this all up in a way, mm-hmm. When I was doing A&R, I had kind of a reputation that I was kind of an alternative guy. Go, from other things that I've been associated with and things that I've signed, and I don't want to go that. But somebody, you can Google me and find out all the other stuff. But I remember, and I had this reputation, and when I did sign John, I remember after the signing, somebody called, I won't mention names here, but somebody kind of famous in the business who was as a producer and who ran his own record company that was part of a bigger company. And he said to me, I can't believe you signed that? What did you sign him for? It's so not you. He's so nondescript. No, you missed the whole point. And I kind of got that. And then that I just didn't even think about, Then down the pike, when this band starts happening, and this is like just about the first album to go gold, I get a call. I'll mention names here. Tunj Aram. Tunj was kind of an all-purpose guy at Atlantic. He was kind of brought in by Ahmet Erdogan, and he did rock promotion. And he was kind of the enforcer at Atlantic. I think your father could tell you some good stories about him. I won't.
Okay.
But
okay.
He calls me one day and he says, he had a heavy Turkish accent. Jerry, he's a two-way street we walked down, Jerry. We had a handshake deal with that kid, and you signed him. There's going to be trouble. We don't do this in the business. I said, hey, Tunj, I had no idea. If you said he had a lawyer, he has a manager, no one said a thing to me. As if I should say we didn't, what do you want me to say? Hey, Tunj, okay, you can take the rec. We'll give you the contract. It's all yours. See, listen, all these things got cleared up. Everybody was happily ever after. John has a great life. He married his high school sweetheart. He does amazing charitable work with those pay as you go restaurants and feeding the homeless, and it's all good. I look back on this, and it's just funny, and it just shows you the little things that people surmount, that talent surmounts, and then somehow, they become important to so many people, and all this stuff just doesn't matter at all. But it's interesting, and that's why I'm here.
and these are the funny stories that would be lost forever if, we didn't get them on the podcast. Good on you, Tiffany. I'm glad that I could actually, bring some of this stuff up, and I'm sure maybe certain people will hear it and they say, I think I don't agree with that. I got to call that Jaffe. He's wrong, and I will defend it to my deathbed. Well, you can have them call me, and we will put it on the record, and we can have a showdown here on Hidden History of Rock and Roll.
That's right. I'll come back. We will do. He said, she said debate right there,
right.
And you can be the moderator.
As long as I can be Judge Judy and I can make her salary, I'll take it.
You deserve to.
It's been really fun listening to all your stories about Bon Jovi, and hopefully you can come back and maybe tell us some stories about Kiss. Who knows? Those are good.
I could do a whole smorgasbord because after in my, I guess, post Polygram, I went into management, and I guess I went back to my alternative roots, and I hooked up with and managed for close to a decade the Jesus and Mary chain, who I say they might not have sold 150 million records worldwide, but I think they are one of the great rock and roll bands of all time. And I'm happy to say I just reunited with them 3 weeks ago when they played Radio City Music Hall, co-headline with the Psychedelic Furs.
Oh wow, that's huge. That's huge. Well, so I'm thinking we're gonna come back for a part 2, Jerry.
I can tell you some wonderful Kiss stories, Motorhead stories that you might have to censor.
There's no censoring here. We are explicit.
Well, then I might have to change the story. And
we are a lot of fun over here. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'm going to turn down the mic, and we're going to close the show.
We hope you enjoyed the latest installment of the Hidden History of Rock and Roll. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on all the podcast platforms. Thanks for listening to the Hidden History of Rock and Roll with your host, Tiffany Scott.